Aristotle believes in diversity of people. In their nature, but all are expected to live in a system where they grow, they become happy and good. This is what he said on diversity. And he said against unity. But a state which becomes progressively more and more of a unity will cease to be a state at all. Plurality of members is natural in a state, and the further it moves away from plurality towards unity, the less a state it becomes and more a household, and the household in turn an individual. So even if it were possible to make such a unification, it ought not to be done. It will destroy the state. So Aristotle's view is that there are differences, and then out of these differences a state comes to existence. There are minimum differences in a family. In a state, there are maximum differences. So people contribute differently, out of which something more comes up. For example, in a controversial way, he looked at slaves differently. He said, anyone who by his nature is not his own man, okay, but another's is by his nature a slave. So some people by nature are slaves, they are natural slaves. But of course, some may have been defeated in a war, then and they become slaves. He called them slaves who became through conventional slaves. Conventional slaves are not slaves by nature, but others are slaves by nature. It means that people are unequal. And then he had similar view on women. Women cannot have political judgment as equal to that of man. So like that, he believed in unequal distribution of political talent, and he thought of how, given this unequal distribution, how should polity be constructed given this inequalities in nature, in virtue, in political competence. But one thing the change that he brought was that he moved away from people whom Plato focused to rules. Plato believed in the rule of good people, but Aristotle understood the importance of rule. So, it is a huge step forward, thinking in terms of what rules. And if once you are convinced that the rules are important, then we get to know the importance of constitution, because constitution is nothing but rule of law. It is about distribution of powers. It is about institutions and their powers and their duties. So, it is to this progress Aristotle contributed. What he said about the rule of law. He said, rule of law is preferable. Rule of law is preferable to that of a single citizen. Even if it be the better course to have individuals ruling, then they should be made law guardians or ministers of law. So, if some individuals are to be given importance and some they have to rule, but how should they behave? They shouldn't behave individually according to their own idiosyncrasies. They should behave as guardians of law. This is what modern notion of rule of law and modern notion of constitutionalism. Okay. And that is why Aristotle gave importance to study of constitutions. He made his students collect and in detail work on the constitutions. How did he define the constitution? He said a constitution could be described as an organization of offices in a state by which the method of their distribution is fixed, the sovereign authority is determined, and the nature of the end to be pursued by association and all its members is prescribed. So, what are the goals of this? What are the institutions? What is their power? How is it distributed? That is what the constitution is, like a modern definition. And 158 constitutions were compared. Aristotle understood the centrality of constitution to the political life. For example, this is what he said. When the constitution changes, polity changes. For since the polis is a community of citizens in a constitution, when the constitution of the citizens changes, and becomes different in kind, the police also will change. We may compare this with a chorus, which may at one time perform in a tragedy and at another in a comedy, so be different in kind, yet all the while be composed of the same person. So the same instrument and same person, different moods are created. In the same way, out of the same people, different politics are created because constitutions are different. So this shows the importance that Aristotle gave to the constitution. Thought of constitutions in terms of how many people have power, people are ruling or rulers, one or few or many. And among these three, there are good forms and bad forms. Okay. For example, a good form is kingship, bad form is tyranny. Kingship, bad form is tyranny. Here, good form is aristocracy, bad form is oligarchy. Good form is polity, bad form is democracy. So, and the difference between good and bad is that for the same number of rulers, in a good form, rulers think about common interests, whereas in a bad system, rulers think about their own interests. It is bad because political system is supposed to take people towards common good life. Okay. But what is Aristotle's ideal form? Aristotle's ideal form is polity. Polity is Aristotle's ideal form. It means this is by many people, and they are working on common interests. Whereas in democracy, it is by many people, but their own interests. But among the bad, which is less bad? Aristotle thought democracy is least bad. It means that he gave importance to constitution where many are ruling compared to few. He said on democracy. Democracy is better than others. So when they meet together, may very likely be better than when people meet together, they may very likely to be better than the few good, if regarded not individually but collectively. Just as a feast to which many contribute is better than a dinner provided out of a single purse. So that's what Aristotle said. Next, Aristotle focuses on what is a political arrangement that is stable and that is not subjected to revolutions. Revolutions can be of two kinds. One kind is that constitution is not changed, but rulers changed. Rulers changed, but constitution same. This is one. And this change takes place through violence. That is bad. And second, rulers change and also constitution changes. This also through violence. So Aristotle did not want these kinds of changes. Aristotle wanted smooth transfer of power and the stability of political arrangements. So what did he think would be the stable system? He felt there are two sources of instability. What are those two sources? They are like this. These two sources, Aristotle said, come from two notions of justice. Two notions of justice. Talking about justice itself. What are these two notions? One notion is of the rich. They say they have wealth and they want to have corresponding political power. So, those who are unequal economically, they want unequal political power, which means poor to have much less political power. The poor won't like this, so they rebel. So this is the problem in oligarchy. Oligarchy is ruled by few rich and they are depriving others of political power in trying to match their economic power with political power. So the poor already do not have economic power and now they want to be deprived of political power, so they rebel. So this is the source of instability in oligarchy. And similarly, there is a source of instability in democracy. The poor here have political power and now they want economic power, because their sense of justice is that political power should match economic power. Okay, in fact, this is goal of our constitution also. Political equality should bring economic equality. And the poor want that economic power, the rich will rebel. The rich will rebel. So they undermine the system. This is the problem in democracy. Remember, both in oligarchy and democracy, rulers are not thinking of all. They are thinking of only their class interests. Okay. So, the instability is coming because of mismatch between power distribution versus income distribution or wealth distribution. Okay. This mismatch is the source of instability. So Aristotle thinks that if mismatch is avoided, If mismatch is avoided, then you create a better system. So, the solution is avoid mismatch. So, how you match economic interests with power is how you deal instability. Okay. So he thinks of some kind of intermediary thing between oligarchy and democracy. So some people call this mixed constitution. Okay. But Aristotle's interest is not about some features of oligarchy, some features of democracy and adding them, but rather it is about how economic interests and power are integrated in the most stable way. Okay. It is here Rand in his book on politics says that to Aristotle, this is the source of political stability. A political system that gives political power to the majority of the citizens, so long as they also possess the majority of society's wealth, is uniquely likely to be stable. So they have political power, and the same people have the majority of wealth. So how can power match wealth? Rand says this requires what sociologists called lozenge-shaped distribution of wealth. What is that? It is this kind. These are the poor people, few in number. Okay, few in number, poor people here only this much, and rich people also few. About this is the income levels. So rich people are few and poor people are few. So majority of the people are middle class. So in terms of numbers, they are in majority, and in terms of wealth, they are having the maximum amount of wealth. It means the tension between polity and economy is least, and that is the source of political stability. Okay. So how you arrange political power with economic interests is a matter of stability. Why was Socrates thinking like this? Rand says that at that time of Peloponnesian War, as Thucydides describes, in many city-states there is a conflict between the rich and the poor. There were civil wars during Peloponnesian War, and also the poor of one state try to cooperate with the poor of another state, and in the same way rich. It means there is a class nature of civil war, and they were trying to change the system to their advantage. So that is why Aristotle thought this is one very important source of instability, and that brings bloodshed, civil war and revolutions. So that is why Aristotle was thinking in terms of which kind of constitutional arrangement would minimize these revolutions. He said certain things about middle classes. He said middle classes are also the better people to rule. Why? He said in all states there may be distinguished three parts or classes of the citizen body: the very rich, the very poor, and the middle class, which forms the mean. Men in this position are most ready to listen to reason. Those who enjoy too many advantages are unwilling to obey. That is rich people. There are also defects in those who suffer from the opposite extreme of lack of advantage. They are far too mean and too poor spirited. These are about very few poor. We have this, on the other hand, people who are ignorant how to rule. This is about the poor, and only know how to obey, as if they were so many slaves. And on the other hand, people who are ignorant how to obey any sort of authority and only know how to rule, as if they were masters of slaves. So some think they are masters and some think they are slaves. So because of which they don't make good rulers. And so middle classes make better rulers. So political system rulers coming from middle classes, and income distribution in a particular shape where the most wealth is concentrated in the middle sector is the source of political stability. But in understanding Aristotle's ideas, people often think of their own. Modern readers think of their own, and then they look at Aristotle's. But that is not really a correct way, because Aristotle was living in a different political and economic system. What is the economic system he was living? It is basically agriculture. It is an agrarian economy. And then what is the political system he is living? It is a very, very small state. The state itself would have only around 10,000 or less than that. And then what modern readers don't understand is that particularly when Aristotle is discussing how people are naturally unequal, and because of which he proposed that in a society many are not citizens, slaves, not citizens, women, not citizens, elderly, no, young, of course. So many are not citizens and very few. So in each family, a family consists of husband, wife, and slaves, children. In this family, only one person is a citizen. It means only father is the connection between family and the state. Through family, the family is representing the state through father, or the state is communicating its values to the family through father. So this is the arrangement. So why these inequalities? Why only men and not women? What we need to understand is that in the present day arrangement, you treat people equally. All men and women are given votes. There is nothing like slaves. But then they elect legislature. Legislature. And from legislature, rulers are elected. So you maintain equality here because it is out of this you are electing a legislature. It means you created inequality here. And then legislatures are electing the rulers. But in Aristotle's thinking, this intermediary step is not there. So in Aristotle's thinking, it is from people rulers should be elected. So there is more justification to think of people as unequals. That is one thing to think about. And second thing is that Aristotle didn't know thing like division of powers, checks and balances. Okay, so he was thinking in terms of rulers, to be guided by rules, but no sufficient systems of legislature, executive, judiciary, separation and things like that. So basically, you have fewer safeguards against the abuse of power in the political systems that Aristotle was imagining. So that is the reason why he had to think of, there is more sense in thinking in terms of unequal citizens and differently natured citizens, but all entitled for common good life.